Hello, welcome to the Mr. Jurgensen Show. Here I am on the East Coast of the United States in Virginia. I'm at the home of George Washington, which is called Mount Vernon. I just took a tour of the house. It's magnificent, it's marvelous, it's beautiful. I toured the gardens and the rest of the farm, the tomb of George Washington, and it's an awesome place to visit. Now today we're going to be talking about George Washington and his life. Now, George Washington is most well known for the time where he gave up all of his power. Okay, he was a general of the Continental Army. He resigned his post because he did not want to become a monarch. He did not want to become a king. He served 2 terms as president, and he stepped down after several people asked him to keep going with the presidency. He stepped down and gave power back to the people. He is a very important man in our history, and we're going to learn a lot more about him today. As we do, I will be touring throughout George Washington's plantation and going through some of the aspects and some of the facts of this plantation.
George Washington was born in 1732 in Virginia. He was born into a wealthy family of tobacco planters. They had a plantation called Mount Vernon. He grew up learning the morals, manners, and etiquette of any regular gentleman of colonial society, which made him successful. He pursued 2 interests: military arts and Western expansion. At age 16, he helped survey Shenandoah lands for Thomas Lord Fairfax. Later, Washington was commissioned a lieutenant colonel in the Virginia militia. This year was 1754. He fought in the first skirmishes of what grew into the French and Indian War. George Washington was sent to the Ohio River Valley to protect the British prospects of trade and expansion against the French. Washington won his first engagement with the French and Indian forces, but was later captured at Fort Necessity in July of 1754. He was allowed to return with his troops to Virginia. This episode demonstrated Washington's bravery and experience and his potential to be a great leader. The next year, as an aide to General Edward Braddock, the French and their Indian allies ambushed Braddock's force. Braddock in the engagement was mortally wounded. After Washington realized Braddock was out of commission, he took command and rallied the troops. He was reported to have been riding back and forth across their line, giving the troops moral support, giving them orders, shouting orders, organizing the troops. And this saved the British force from annihilation, and they were able to escape with their lives. From 1759 to the outbreak of the American Revolution, Washington managed his lands around Mount Vernon and served in the Virginia House of Burgesses. He later married a widow by the name of Martha Dandridge Custis. He devoted himself to a busy and happy life. But like his fellow planters, Washington felt himself exploited by British merchants and hampered by British regulations. As the quarrel with Mother Country grew acute, he moderately but firmly voiced his resistance to these restrictions.
Here we are in one of George Washington's gardens that is located east of the mansion, the main house. I wanted to take a shot of this place because this was a self-sustaining farm. George Washington didn't leave for the market every day, or Martha did not go to the market every day to go get food. Everything was grown here. Everything that they used in the house was here. Everything. Now they would have grown, to my left, cabbage, radishes. Also, they would have had apples, apricots, cherries, all types of fruits, all types of vegetables that they could have cooked inside of the mansion. Now, if we look further down to the east, there's more livestock over this retaining wall. There's more livestock, pigs, sheep, goats. and cows. Now, the buildings that are located right next to the mansion would have been the areas where they would have slaughtered those animals and cured the meat and smoked the meat so that it would lasted for a longer time. This was a self-sustaining farm. This was a complete plantation of its time.
In response to the tensions between Great Britain and the colonies, the Second Continental Congress appointed Washington as general of the Continental Army. He realized early that the best strategy was to harass the British. He reported to Congress, "We should on all occasions avoid a general action or put anything to risk, unless compelled by a necessity into which we ought never to be drawn." Ensuing battles saw him fall back slowly, then strike unexpectedly. Allied with the French, Washington managed to defeat the British and forced General Cornwallis to surrender at Yorktown in 1781. One of Washington's most famous victories occurred in Trenton, New Jersey on December 26, 1776, when his forces crossed the frozen Delaware River and surprised and captured nearly 1,000 well-trained Hessian mercenaries. This victory was a pivotal one in that it encouraged the colonies that the British could be defeated and gave enough confidence to the Continental Army to continue fighting.
Yes, George Washington owned slaves. Around 316 slaves would have worked on this farm, on this plantation. Now behind me over to my left were the slaves' quarters. Today it's a gift shop, okay? But in its time it would have been where the slaves would have slept. All the way down this row would have been tradesmen. The slaves would have been perfected different trades like shoemaking, and blacksmith is a little bit further down, but all the slaves would have mastered those different trades. And this is basically the row where the slaves would have lived.
After the British were defeated, the United States had now set a course. It first started out with the government called the Articles of Confederation. Later in 1789, the colonies decided to revise this form of government and created the U.S. Constitution, or ratified the U.S. Constitution. In that same year, George Washington was elected President of the United States and served from 1789 until he resigned in 1797. He is famous for what he has done throughout his life in the American Revolution and as a president. As president, he unified the country and prevented it from crumbling at its early stages. He also relinquished power when he could have been president as long as he wanted, but he gave that power up so he did not become a monarch. Washington died 2 years later in 1799 at his home in Mount Vernon.